I'm Brian Carpenter, host of Fresh Air at 5, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
How long will we sit here in silence? That's a wonderful question. Welcome to the High Tech Podcast. Joined by myself, Josh, and Will, your co-hosts. We are the co-hosts and the High Tech Podcast. I don't know why I'm like giving a new introduction. With like, for you first-time listener out there, I know you're somewhere. Okay. My name's Josh.
In Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah, Madison, Wisconsin.
I don't know.
That was a choice. I'm going to go with Iceland. Okay, new listener in Iceland.
Welcome.
Okay. Welcome. Anyway, super excited. Another week of the High Tech Podcast with some great topics and things coming up in season 3. Welcome everybody. How you doing, Will?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a Tuesday. We're done with the work day.
Or whatever day
nice.
You're listening to the podcast.
It's our Tuesday. It's your Tuesday and my Tuesday at the moment.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
But no, we're good. I'm feeling a little unmotivated at the moment. It's been a pretty slow time.
That must be tough. We should you know what we should do? We should talk about motivation.
If only we had an idea about what we could do differently.
Let's scrap the topic we were going to talk about, which is the golden key to solving all education problems. And we'll just put that one on the back burner. Yeah, we'll put that one. That's a season 4 problem. Let's talk about motivation. Okay, obviously, we're being dumb. We're talking about motivation theory in this episode, and actually, the next one is a 2-parter. We are jumping into. We're excited to talk about that. Before we do, though, just a reminder. Find us on the internet. Please, if you haven't already.
We have not yet gotten to vinyl, but when we get to vinyl, we will let you know. Until then, find us on the internet.
We all know that listening to us on the vinyl was the important part. Like somewhere is like, man, if I could just listen to my podcast on my record player, I'm sure the audio would be so much crisper. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
It's killing me.
Yeah, final High Tech Podcast. It'll be our Christmas album. It'll just be me and Will saying "Merry Christmas" over and over again. Always wanted to do a Christmas album. Anyway, remember, check us out online at High Tech Podcast. You can find us on Twitter or YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube already, socials are down here. Subscribe to us, or check out our website at hightechpod.us. That's it. That's all we're gonna say. Okay, motivation. Let's talk about motivation. Anybody having problems motivating their students?
Never. No faculty deal with that.
Yeah. I was expecting answers, people. You didn't answer. That's weird.
Yeah. Where are you, everyone?
Where's
the round of the raucous applause?
Live session. Anyway, okay.
If only.
I have bad jokes tonight. I gotta be honest.
Take a nap. I'll get this in here. I had a faculty member once come to me and actually address this issue more at like a persistence level. Like, I can't get students to make it into week 2 and 3 of the course. And that was one of those things that we addressed. Like, persistence comes to a lot of different issues. So it's not the issue of this episode, but motivation is one of the issues in persistence. Like, have you accurately identified or at least moderately pinpointed what your students are interested in when you're talking about your subject matter, right? Like, if we opened up our episode or our class on tanks, we clearly know that everyone who attended would be interested, right?
Oh, clearly. Is there anybody not walking into a tanks class going, I am incredibly motivated to learn?
The hands are up the entire time.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, they're trying to like come down to the front of the room.
You motivate people in a tanks class. You take them outside, you put them in front of a tank, okay, and you shoot that tank just very close to them, okay?
Oh gosh,
like that's no violence. We're not killing anybody, okay? But we're just reminding them.
We're just gonna let them see it fire.
That could kill them, okay? And then during the class,
I think that's emotional abuse, and it doesn't have to be physical violence to be wrong.
These are perspectives. This is an open, safe zone. The high tech podcast where there's no bad idea.
Is your class is not.
Okay, that's fine. We'll figure it out. No, yeah. I mean, okay, this is a comment. This is I think a topic that's popular to talk about. I laugh about this topic a little bit too, because we all want our students to be motivated when we're trying to teach them. At least I hope we do. Some of you might be like, I don't care if they're motivated. They just need to listen to me. And that's
if I start talking, they'll be listening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All of us want them to actually be motivated and interested in what we're doing. And I think there's a lot of good research and stuff to show that, okay, actual motivation is better than just wanting to get good grades. We want to get to what motivates our students so we can leverage that to create good learning. Right. And so I think that's part of the reason we wanted to talk about this is what is motivation theory? We'll talk about a little bit about what motivation theory is and kind of how that should impact what we do in the classroom versus also what we design, things like that. We're gonna talk about that a little bit in the part 2. But I think the question is how do we get our students motivated in our classrooms to engage in both stuff that's happening in the classrooms and the activities we're asking them to do. I think most teachers, professors would agree. We don't want people phoning it in, right? We all know that paper we've read where we're this person didn't care.
No.
Yeah, it never happens. It doesn't happen in my classes, clearly. They're always super motivated. But yeah, I don't know. So I know when we were talking about this, you were kind of listing out some stuff you were thinking about we're talking about how to motivate students. What's some of the theory? I think the question for this episode, right, is what's some of the theory that's out there? What are people saying about how we motivate people, right?
Yep. Well, and the very basic distinction that almost everyone knows, I'll be honest, I was trying to Google here to see if there was an initial name is associated with it. And there's actually just lots of citations. And I think this is more held as a psychological fact that motivation is broken up into intrinsic and extrinsic factors. What you were discussing about grades and stuff like that, extrinsic factor. That's something external, outside of, not generated in the person, that could be a motivator. So food is an extrinsic, grades extrinsic. Even the temperature of the classroom can be an extrinsic factor in motivation, while goals, skills, passions, artistic abilities, those things might be intrinsic motivators, internal. They start with the person who has them, and they can be, again, harnessed. The hard part, right, is if it's intrinsic, it's inside. You can't know it's there unless you ask the student or have them do something to demonstrate that intrinsic motivation. Whereas extrinsics, right, we can try extrinsic motivations all day. I have the control to put those into the student's environment. But I don't think that there's one specific name. There of course is a lot of work coming from Abraham Maslow, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that starts a lot of this motivational theory. But this is just my ignorance. I'm not finding anything quickly. I don't see a name William James, father of modern psychology. There's not a name like that for me at the moment. In intrinsic, extrinsic, and that's
if you're listening to this episode and you know who started the intrinsic motivation ideas. Hit us up on Twitter and let us know. Correct Will and I. Right now, I'm gonna say it was Scooby. I think.
Ooh. Okay.
I don't know. Yes, we'll play guesses. I do think that's an important distinction, right? When we're talking about motivation, it's a complex topic, but I think we've tried to kind of term those two things, and I think that it holds up in theory. That okay, obviously there's external things that are motivating people, like we've talked about, like grades. Food, motivation. I'm not saying starve your students, but just saying.
But if they are starving, it's something to be aware of.
It is aware of. Actually, a good example. I'm making a joke about this, but intrinsic motivation working in the negative. Those of you who have those classes right before lunch and people are super hungry, that's a motivation of why they're not paying attention to you and they're unmotivated in your class, because there's another more powerful intrinsic or extrinsic motivation motivating them, which is they're hungry. So they don't care anymore about anything you're saying.
They have checked out.
Unless you are a sandwich that's talking, they're not listening.
Oh my gosh! Now I'm just imagining like wah 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 wah, and it's
like
just a sandwich.
Tornado? That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That's not a thing to say. Put on a sandwich costume to motivate your students during lunch, but
I'm pretty sure that might negatively impact it.
I don't know. I'd pay to see it. Anyway, like, so I think it's important. I think, is it safe to say what a lot of people are trying to get to, and honestly, I think is the more, pack for punch, but also the harder thing to understand is like, how do we intrinsically motivate students?
Absolutely.
Does that feel right? Because I feel like we've tried extrinsic ideas, right? Like throwing grades, or we're not going to get too deep into this because we already made fun of it in our game-based learning series. But badges,
right,
this is how we ended up with badges for everything. And we're convinced that would motivate people. If you're interested in how much we dislike those, you can go check out episodes 54 through 56. That's our gamification series. And we talk about why we don't really like badging systems that much. But that part's easier. Like, we can kind of like force motivation thing, kind of like motivation models onto people. But intrinsic is harder. But I think that's the thing, really, when we're talking about motivation theory, we're aiming for it. Does that feel...
Yeah, and I agree with you as the target, and that's where I was like trying to put some of the show notes together. Folks, we actually did some research. Ironically, not enough, but we did some research tonight, making sure we had the right things to say. One of the things that I think is so important about that intrinsic thing, and something to identify, is it's so immediately tied to emotions and affect, right? Extrinsic things, like I might think, cognitively, like if I put grades on the line, they'll be interested in grades. Well, they might be cognitively want, A's in their classes, right? But they might emotionally be depressed and not capable of doing that, right? And so I like to see motivation as this culmination of emotions when it comes to the intrinsic experience. And what that means for us as instructors is identifying what motivations, what emotions are the learners dealing with that we need to activate to be able to reach them. That's why, we promised ourselves, each other, it's a little bit of a pinky promise, not to get into game theory tonight, video gaming and stuff. But that's part of why that does work. The emotional response to video games is fun. The emotional response to eating is satisfaction. The emotional response to an A+ is satisfaction as well. Maybe joy, right? Maybe some people are upset they didn't get the A++. Maybe there's some sadness in the react. But like that's I think what I like to drive at when I think about these intrinsic things. I love the theory of motivation. I love that it's an important aspect of designing learning and making learning stick with our learners. I've always felt that the reason I've been a successful learner, and folks, I did the 4.0 in high school, 3.99 in college, undergrad, 4.0 in master's degree.
God.
I know, right? I really I did that because I was motivated. I don't consider myself to be a genius. I cannot recall everything I've learned. It's not an eidetic memory. Like, I have forgotten as much as I've learned, but I was motivated to get that A. And that worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. What it activated in me was pride. It activated in me some joy. I liked most of my learning. You know what I mean? Like, there's emotions I could tie that back to that I really think if we could find those in our learners, understanding the intrinsic motivators and the emotions that are attached to them, we might be able to better activate the longevity of their learning, their interest in learning. Does that resonate with you? Like, can you think of the times where you were motivated? What got you motivated?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in the podcast before, but my context, right, is like high school. I was not the 4.0.
That was an amazing laugh. I know you don't smoke, but that was like a smoker's laugh.
It was like that was the opposite. Like like if your house was on fire and you like there's a guy who strategically escaped the fire without being burnt at all, and then there's the guy who like just was on fire and made it out the door with time that somebody like that was me in high school. Okay, was like I got out of high school just
Vivid.
barely alive. Okay, that was how it happened. In fact, I maybe wasn't convinced I was graduating for a few months. If my parents listen to that, they don't really listen to this podcast. But I'm not even sure they know. I forget if they knew that or not. That I wasn't sure. If I was
which episode is 87? And your mom and dad's names are.
Don't worry about it. They're busy. Anyway. So
15 minutes into the episode.
That was my high school experience. Now, why was that my high school experience? I could have cared less about anything I was learning in high school. I didn't like math. I did better in my history classes. And the main reason was I was super interested in like what happened in the past. Like that was honestly why I was good in my history classes. I was interested in the content I was learning about. English, I did really well in the like reading side of things because I was interested in the stories. And as Will already knows, the conception of grammar for me was like I don't know, that seems weird. That seems like the world's not gonna fall because I forgot that comma. I don't need that. Like speech classes I did really well in because I liked talking. Who would have thought?
Check out.
Yeah. So anyway, that's like high school experience, right? I wasn't super motivated. I cared more about the music I was working on back then. I did much better in college. I think in two reasons. One, I cared about a lot of the content I was learning in college. And two, I had like an experience where my whole band experience kind of fell apart. And honestly, I was just looking for a place that I could like not suck. Wow. And I think I that pushed me to get serious about schooling and learning. And then I found out that honestly, I wasn't actually that bad at it. So I was like, okay, this isn't actually that difficult. And I started getting interested in that, in just learning new stuff. Like it kind of pushing, I think I had found an area in my life that didn't work and I felt like I was stuck. So I wanted to learn more. And that pushed me into college, which eventually got to college topics that I actually cared about and was already passionate about. And so then that pushed me to want to learn everything I could about those topics. For instance, my lowest college grade was tennis and bowling. You want to know why? I didn't give a crap about tennis and bowling.
That's amazing.
But all of like my theology stuff I was learning, interpretive stuff, even like more basic courses, like I was listening to those because I was learning skills that and learning new ideas and concepts that I felt like were growing me as a person. And so that's what motivated me, right? And I think that's part of the reason why like Will and I like are not that we were like we're not perfect students by any means at all. We did a lot of stuff, but I feel like we did well in our classes, and we were a student who engaged with our instructors a lot. You more than anybody else. But like I did too. Like I remember meeting with instructors. Like I was a student who wanted to talk with my instructors outside of class. I was.
Yeah. Didn't you have like a weekly one-on-one with the one professor?
Yeah, I did it for a while. Yeah,
for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like we engaged a lot with the professors, and I feel like that was because we were motivated to both. There was a little part of us that liked winning. We liked being at the top of the class. And there was also a little part of us that just, we liked the content. We wanted to learn more. And so that I think motivated us.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think it's important to remember all of that because I think a lot of times as professors, we can look at students and go, oh, they're doing really well. Like I struggle with the professors who are like, oh, they're doing really well because man, they're getting it. You know, they know it. This student just is not getting it. Well, there might be a motivation. There's most likely a motivation issue.
Right.
There might be something that's not engaging them in that area, or they'll look at a student and go, man, they're just a poor student. Well,
and there's
like,
there's
what's
two things.
What's the motivation behind why they're doing what they're doing?
There are two things that could be happening with that student, and I think that's why I love this conversation. Right? There's a thousand things, but like two things that stand out in research are that they may not be able to affectively, emotionally connect with the context. Like they're not interested. They're just not interested. Or they're not interested in you, right? There's always that opportunity where they're like the content, but can't vibe with you, or they like you, but can't vibe with the content. That could be the breakdown. The other element to it, besides an emotional response, is it could just be a difficulty. And this is where Krashen's theory of I+1 comes into motivation that I've always loved this. I mean, when the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, that's video games. But also in general, like that's how I think we need to be aware of students who are struggling. If we can get them to sit down with us, and if they won't sit down with us, that's usually because there's some sort of like emotional/social issues that they're dealing with, or you're the problem. They don't like you, right? But if it's not you, if it's not their thing, they might sit down with us. One of those first questions should be, is this too hard? Are you, can you connect with me for like the first 3 or 5 minutes, but then I lose you after that? Like some students don't have the foundational knowledge they need to be successful for your level of content. And so Krashen's I+1 theory is identifying where the student is, I, and giving them 1 plus, whatever that is, +1 level over that in difficulty. The problem is, if you're teaching 40 students, there is no scalable, consistent way for you to know where they all are. So in many ways, when we're designing courses, even as instructional designers, we do analysis and we're like, oh, your students are second year students and this is what they're dealing with. 60-40, 70-30, maybe. Like we're going to miss folks, right? There's going to be some first year students who made it in. There's going to be some fourth year students taking it again. There's all sorts of things that happen just like that. But the student may not as be informed on your subject matter. And so when you think that you've designed the course to take everybody as a second year student +1, that first year student in there, it's like +4. It's just too hard.
Yeah.
And that's like you and I both know, right? Like that happens. The students end up in courses they're not supposed to be in all the time.
Oh, 100%. And like I think it's important to remember those pieces. I think you're getting to an important point too. This isn't just like getting to like, because I think sometimes we talk about motivation, I can already hear like the certain professors I know in my head. They were like, I don't, I don't care about, this is all too emotional, right? Like we're just, we're learning content. But some of motivation also is like difficulty level, understanding where the student is at. And that stuff will help either motivate or demotivate somebody to engage with your content. Okay. Like put it in practical terms that a lot of us realize today. Like, has there been that task all week that you're ignoring because it's complicated?
Have you seen my task board? What are you doing? What are you talking about?
I have one right now, right? Like, so I have like a course of content I'm trying to get through to upscale some stuff we're working on. And it's just, there's so much to it. And I probably shouldn't be doing it right now, but I'm trying. And I'm like, I'm so unmotivated to get to it because I know I'm not going to like get it done right away. Right. And so it pushes like that difficulty level can demotivate us to engage with things. And somebody would say, oh, well, that's a character issue. They should deal, but all of us deal with this. Like if we're overwhelmed or we, something seems hard, our natural reaction is to avoid it. And that's not to say take your course content and make it less hard. It's to say that if that's a motivating issue, like the student's overwhelmed or it's too difficult for them, that's if our goal is not just to impart knowledge, but our goal is to actually help people learn, we need to understand what's stopping them from engaging with the learning and try to find ways to lessen those barriers. And so it's not make your course content easier, but it might be how can I help the students see more achievable options like into getting into that? Or how can I help give them things that'll help get them to a better level of understanding or where they are, right? And
that's scaffolding.
It's scaffolding. And we'll talk more about that into the part 2 here. We're talking about design. But that's a reason I think you and I keep coming back to games when we talk about this stuff. I'm going to do it one more time, even though we promised ourselves we weren't going to. Is because games are like a practical example of this. Like if a game is like insanely too hard for people, like I don't want to be a game designer because that's got to be very difficult. If a game is way too easy, we don't want to engage. And we have that problem. Students who are like, your course is just way too easy. I'm not motivated. Yeah. Like, I don't care because
I heard about a game that was only supposed to take 10 hours. A very, very popular game. I mean, like my wife wanted it. I was like, gotta buy this game. I'm like, it only takes 10 hours to beat. Like, why would I want to play that? What's
the point?
Like that to me, I want to sink 60 hours, 100 hours into a game and enjoy every hour of it. But the game ended up being fun. I have played it. It's worth it. But like that approach of like, hey, this might be too simple is just as important as this might be too hard. Like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the too hard side of it is, right, like I play games where like I literally can't, like it gets me so angry I want to throw something.
Dark Souls.
Yes. Okay. Anybody listen to games? These are real games. And the part of that is because it's you don't want to feel that way. So right. Like that's the same thing with education. Imagine that student in your course who every time they're trying to engage with this paper, it's not that they don't care. It's that they're trying to do it and they feel like they just can't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that point, what's the point of them trying anymore? Like that's what they're going to feel like. Like I might as well just not engage with this. So it's
and then they don't come to your class anymore.
Yeah, they don't come to your class anymore. They don't show up. They don't. I think part of the reason to talk about motivation theory is not just like how do we motivate people to be in our classes, but to understand that there are motivations behind each of the decisions your students are doing. And it's not always just because they're lazy and they don't want to be a part of your course. Sometimes there's outside reasons we don't know about. Sometimes there's internal reasons. Sometimes it has to do with the course itself or the teaching. But it's up to us as teachers to try to figure that out and to work with our students to try to understand what's motivating them. And we can't solve all the problems, but we can at least find areas where we might be able to help, or we might be able to, motivate students more in what we're doing.
And that's the justification for this two-parter, right, folks? Like identifying in this episode, what are the things to think about? What are the possible considerations in motivation? What is happening with your students, both in their heads and what we might say is in their hearts, right? But the next episode, we intend to dig into a couple of ways to do this. Like, what do we do to design motivation into our learning activities? Is there something you can do when you start an activity or when you start a lecture that will help you identify where your students are, or help them identify for themselves where they are? Because this doesn't have to be all on us. It is not our job to fix broken students, quote unquote. Like, I please don't take me the wrong way there, but like, we are here to identify ways we can improve our teaching practices to reach as many students as we can, which isn't all of them. It never will be all of them. One of the big elements of this that I think we've spoken to, but I just dropped some final points of research on here. Self-determination theory was a big movement into the 70s, coming into the 80s. It's been a big point for where we are today. It's kind of the response to the behaviorism of the old theories. Like, if I just give them rewards, that will drive them towards the good things. So self-determination theory specifically tries to identify what we need to know of ourselves, what we need to know of how we are motivated to drive ourselves to become self-determined, right? So one of the articles that brought this to light for me in my graduate studies was actually by Nesbitt in 2012. The title of that article is The Role of Self-Reflection, Emotional Management of Feedback, and Self-Regulation Processes in Self-Directed Leadership Development. As a mouthful. I love academic titles because they're useless.
Those are small words.
But
totally small words.
Notice in there self-reflection, emotional management, self-regulation. These ideas that we need to help our students identify the self-awareness, to identify in themselves the good things. Because at the end of the day, even if they have intrinsic motivators we can use, if they can't communicate them, or if they're not aware of them to communicate them, we're no better off. So there's a give and take, and there's a whole thing. I think this is why it's such an important field. We as professors are the front line of it, but there's a whole college that comes around these students that hopefully should be building them up to make them able to do this. That's why the college experience is so important, in my opinion. You and I were buddies in the dorm who shared jokes, who shared notes, who went to classes together. And some of that alone continued to motivate us, right? Like, we had somebody shoulder to shoulder with us who is just as interested or interested in different ways that could push us forwards. That's one thing that helped me identify the things I like to learn about and help me know what you like to learn about. If we didn't have each other, didn't have that college experience, if we didn't have, and sometimes it's even just counseling and emotional support, right? In college experiences, we might not get our students to drive towards these internal things that they need to understand about themselves to help them learn the external stuff. I see it in younger folks that I'm assuming, like some cousins and some family friends and stuff like that. There's just no self-awareness yet. And it's okay for a 15 to 16-year-old. That's part of their growing up. But I am concerned, that doesn't, when does that stop? When do these people start to come into their self-awareness and be able to motivate themselves to show up to class on time, to take notes, to try a different style of note taking, to ask for help? These are all things that tie into motivation that we are not responsible for as the instructors, as the instructional designers, but are critical elements of getting our students motivated to learn in our online classes, in our face-to-face classes. It's critical.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a lot of motivation theory. And I think let's leave it at that. Part 2, we'll talk more about like how do we actually design this into some of our courses, because I think this is a two-parter in that, one, we got to understand what we're looking for, understand how we engage with our students, try to understand them more, and I think be more gracious in that area, like getting that students it's not all just because they don't like you or the class. It's because of different motivations. It's different pieces why students do different things. But then there's also this other side of the coin to motivation theory about, okay, how do we actually through design a course and assessments to actually encourage motivation. I want to say encourage because we can never design to just automatically have motivation. There's always going to be that student who just isn't motivated in the topic at all or anything we're talking about. And so some of the design that we're doing just isn't going to work. But it will, I think, help encourage us motivation in a lot of students if we do it the right way. So we want to talk a little bit about that next episode. But before we do that, this is the High Tech Podcast. We always talk about techie. We always get techie on this podcast. And I will say one of the things that motivates me to get things done, Will, is a checkbox. I gotta be honest, okay? There is a feeling when you're like, it's gone. Like, let's be honest, half the stuff I set up in my own Notion system are just to make me feel good about things being done. Like that's
and if you want the checkbox of all checkboxes, our app this week, Asana, has tried to make it even better. Okay. Yeah. Have you used Asana at all or recently?
Yeah. So I mean, I played around with it not recently. So for all transparency's sake here, Will is much more familiar with Asana than I am. Which some of you who've just been recently listening to the podcast to listen to me are like, "What? Wait, what now? I thought Josh was the obsessed project management person." I am.
He is.
I looked at Asana and chose Notion to go somewhere else. But that's not because I didn't like Asana. I do actually like Asana. It's just it just didn't fit the needs personally that I wanted, and our team went with something else.
And to me, this is like picking a notebook, right? Like if I want the leather bound, you might want the ring binder. It's okay. We all want different notebooks.
It's fine.
Asana has a like beta or whatever, some just fun feature that when you check boxes, unicorns run across your screen. And it's not just unicorns. Sometimes it's a narwhal. Sometimes like it's funny, it's cute, it's beautiful. But like it's one of those moments like, oh yeah, I love checking off a box. And you check a box, you're like, oh yes, I do love the checking off the box. It's so cute. It just flies across your screen, brings a little bit of joy into your life. So it's not just checking the box in Asana. It's releasing the narwhal. It's releasing the unicorn for a little extra delight. I use Asana in a professional capacity. So it is something I use for work. That does mean we have premium features. You do not have to do it that way. Josh and I, when we were looking this up originally, did check the pricing. And of course, now I don't have it off the top of my head, but that's something we'll make sure we have
No, real quick, I have it. So there's a free basic plan. So anything we're
Perfect.
talking about, as we start to get into features, I think it'd be helpful just to know like what's actually available. So
Yep.
the reason actually I'm impressed with Asana is because their basic plan that's free has gotten a lot better since when I looked at it last time.
Yeah.
So like you still get like unlimited tasks. You can set up a bunch of projects with task lists and different board views, and a calendar view. If you like looking at calendars, you can actually invite other people in. You can have 15 people in your
Yep.
stuff up to the free version. They have a bunch of integrations with a ton of different apps. So if you're using like note apps and stuff, most likely they integrate with Asana in some way.
Yep.
There's file storage, activity logs. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I think the biggest thing is like if we're talking about this from a personal management side, although if you're looking at this for teams, Asana is a great project management tool if you're looking for this like for a department that you're working in or whatever it may be. But I think part of the point of this is that as an educator or somebody working in education or designing courses, if you're an ID, we all have a ton of different like competing priorities that we're working on, from building out lesson plans to courses to project managing designs for courses. If you're a designer, all of that stuff, you need to track it somewhere. And so Asana is a great tool for that. So their basic plan could help you do all of that stuff. And then they do have like a premium plan that's like $11 a month ish. And 25, it looks like they got some other stuff. And I think they have they have a student plan, if I'm right.
Yeah. So students, and this is one of those things to confirm. We are gonna just nail the logistics here, and then I'll get into like why I love using it and what it can do for you. Students actually one-on-one can have a free Asana account, so it's like a little bit premium. It's got a little more functionality. I don't think it's like pro, but it is better than the just free account. So as a student .edu account, you're getting there free. It is not free to use with like an institution, right? So a faculty member might be able to get a free account with their edu account, but it will not be set up where you could run your class in it, right? You're not gonna be able to get like 40, 50, 100 students in there. It will be still limited probably with the free.
And I wouldn't necessarily use Asana for something like that anyway. I think anything we're talking about for Asana, I wouldn't use this to like track deadlines with your students. Like I would use this.
Yep.
I think we're talking about this at a personal level, or if you're a team of people, whether you're an academic department or
you
whatever.
You can have students do it for like
progress on work.
You could have students do it for like a project.
That's
like
true.
Groups of 5 students. Like I want you to track your project from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester, or something. Yeah, and that could be a very that could be an authentic experience if you're having students work in marketing or some of these more corporate leaning positions where they might use Asana. Like that's a pretty good option. But it is free for general use. It is free for students and .edu accounts. You're not going to get the bigger, broader accounts that way, but what the big thing is that you get with the free is just general task management, general project management. What I love about it from my work standpoint and from the broader standpoint of the product is that it does have functionality for like huge projects, like projects where you have milestones where you have projects in the milestones, projects where you have tasks inside the milestones, inside the projects, inside the tasks. Like if you are trying to build a company, Asana has the layers you need to track everything that has to get done, and it can build dependencies. So if something's blocking another task or another project, you can make those correlations that like it's visible on the timeline. Like we cannot move with Q2 in this project until we finish this project in Q1. Like it got some really good features that way. And so like at a free level, it's task management, it's project management. But once you've paid up, once you're using that premium, you can do everything you need to. And then the reporting, I can't say it's the most robust reporting. Like everybody still in corporate takes their reporting over to Tableau if they really need to do like big stuff. But they have pie graphs, they have some basic burn charts, they have stuff like that where you're looking at your work over time, which is important for folks who are considering like legitimate agile or scrum project management. Like they have the tools you need to get going with those kinds of things. There's no point system so far as I found. You could probably fake a point system because they allow custom fields in Premium. So you could add as many custom fields, free text, drop downs, number based calculations. Like there's a lot of options when it comes to building it out. I've turned it into a ticketing system. So I created a form. People submit the form. It adds a task. I get notified. Boom. I've got a ticket system for my learning management system. You know what I mean? Like it's not just, hey, I want to write a book. Let me write up a plan to write my book. It's everything from task management, ticketing, troubleshooting. We're doing all of our project planning in there. So we've got Q1, Q2, Q3, all 4 quarters for this year. And in each quarter, all of the programs we're expecting to do. And in each of those programs, all the projects to get those programs completed. And each of those projects, all the tasks assigned to the different personnel. So it's pretty robust. I love using it. It's got dark mode. I think it's dark by default. So that's, a big win for those of us who look at screens all day. And rainbows. Like, who can complain about rainbows with unicorns and narwhals? I'm all in when it comes to Asana.
It's got good stuff. It's a cool tool. And if you didn't know half the project management stuff that Will said, like points and things like that, just ignore it. You don't need to worry about those things.
That's totally fine. Totally fine. I would say if you're interested about more project management stuff, you need to go watch the video Josh did on his Para project planning methodology on our YouTube and on our website.
To the normal person. The points system. I don't talk anything about agile story points.
But Para is it's a very easy and approachable methodology.
I would say you could apply it would be very easy to do in Asana. Yeah. So it's a very cool tool. I would say check it out. It's just asana.com. And because it's free, you can jump in and start playing around with stuff. You don't have to get super complicated from the beginning.
Yeah, there's file limitations on free, so you're not gonna don't think about your having your students submit videos to that was one of those things when I was in instructional technology and instructional design. Faculty were always talking to me like, so how can I get the students to submit really large files to me? If you're still asking that question, you're not using Google Drive or OneDrive through your institution, which should have nearly unlimited space. Like Asana is not your file transferring website. Nearpod isn't. I mean, how many different things have I have people like, hey, can I use this to no?
There's always things.
Yeah. So it's it'll get your projects done. It'll let you do reporting on the other side of it. If you were to use that from year to year, you could get kind of good data across your students across time if you can find the right way to deliver it. If you're just using it for your own stuff, you'll just be more efficient and have more reporting on how well you're doing at the work that you're doing. So, That's Asana, folks. All right, this is episode 1 of Motivations. Episode 2 is next week, episode 88. Wow, I like 8s. I like 88. That's fun.
Yeah, that's nice.
We're going to jump back into it. Josh takes the lead with this episode on designing motivation. I don't know how he's going to title it or wants to title it, but that'll come for us. And we're going to look
nervous. I'm supposed to take the lead on it.
You did research. I did research.
It'll be fine.
And then the app next week is going to be a presentation tool called Satori. So make sure you tune in. Find us on Twitter and YouTube at High Tech Podcast. Email us at inbox@hightechpod.us. Go to our website, hightechpod.us, for all of our episodes. Every single one has a page, just like this one today. I'm going to have some information
if you're watching
on
the video,
how to get started.
Down here. Just look at the social media right there. If you're not watching the video, that's fine. But what are you doing? Go to YouTube. Go watch the video. See our pretty faces.
All right, folks. Thank you again for joining us for another week of the High Tech Podcast as we continue to look at what it looks like to harness any technology in motivating our students, whether in the classroom or online or in person or hybrid or wherever the heck they are. Until next week, see ya.
See ya.